live from our studios here in Haverfordwest on your Thursday evening. I'm Toby Ellis with you on Healthy Minds, Better Lives, just approaching 9:30. And across Pembrokeshire, we have many different guests and contributors here on the show. And now we're joined from Wendy Diment in Penally. Hi, Wendy. Welcome along to the show.
Hi, Toby. Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you as well. And thank you for joining us on what I guess is a very sort of poignant period for you, Wendy, as it was World Lupus Day yesterday. Now, I mean, I've heard this sort of, this you talked about for quite a few years and sort of doing a bit of research before the show, just finding out a bit about the disease. So it occurs when the body's immune system attacks your own tissues and organs. So it's an immune disease. Inflammation caused by lupus can affect many different body symptoms, including your joints, your skin, kidneys, brain cells, heart, lungs, pretty much every part of the human body. So I mean, it's quite severe, needless to say, really. But how did lupus enter your life? How many years ago were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed in October 2013. But actually, I think with hindsight, I probably had it since the birth of my third child. So in January 2008, that's when, looking back with hindsight, I can see the symptoms started then. So yeah, so I've had the diagnosis itself for 9 years, but probably been living with it for longer than that.
So were you aware of lupus sort of before, as you say, in hindsight, you had a bit of an inkling, or when it sort of came, you had that moment, you thought, crikey, this is what I've had for such a long time?
I had no idea. I'd never heard of it. It was actually my husband that suggested I might have it. At the time, I was really struggling to look after the children and sort of cope with work and running the house and all the other things that we do. And I was going to bed. I was putting the children to bed at sort of 7, and by 7:30, I was in bed myself, and I was sleeping right through till 7:30 the next morning. And I was still exhausted and wondering how I was going to cope with the day. So we knew there was something wrong with me, but I thought, I've had 3 children close together. Perhaps I'm trying to do too much. Perhaps I'm anemic. And I was just getting rest, really. I hadn't gone to the doctors about it at that point. But my husband stayed up one night and watched a programme with Tom Cox, and he was talking about a new lupus drug that had been put on the market by GlaxoSmithKline. And basically, he came upstairs and woke me up and said, I think you've got lupus. And I didn't know what he was talking about, and I told him off for waking me up. So I went back to sleep. And the next day I Googled it, and I thought, actually, I think you might be right.
Wow, incredible. Tammy, we'll kick off with your first question for Wendy this evening.
Well, just following on Wendy touching on just the putting the children to bed, for example, and just feeling exhausted. I mean, how did it impact on the family? Just you kind of not being able to do the things that you wanted to, as well, then just having that feeling that you weren't coping with your mental health, because that would have an impact as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the children at that time, I was 39.
Yeah.
And the children were 9, 8, and 5, I think. So they were quite young and obviously busy. They're very close together. They're very active kids at that point. So yeah, it was difficult, and it was affecting everybody because I was just so exhausted, and I was getting a lot of headaches and lots of things that I just didn't know what was going on with me. So you do kind of think, am I going slightly crazy here? What is going on with me? I don't really understand what's happening to me. So yeah, it has a big impact on everybody, and I guess energy levels are probably the thing that has affected the children the most. There have been times when they've sort of said to me, "Oh, Mum, I didn't realise that was happening, or you were suffering from this," because I guess you can try and hide as much as you can, but you can't hide the fatigue and the having to go to bed all the time. So I'm lucky that now I know what I'm living with, and I've got some medication. I can pace myself. I'm not saying I always get it right, but I do try and manage my life with a diary, try not to overbook myself. If I've got a busy day, I'll try and book the next day at home. If I have a busy weekend, I'll keep the next weekend free. So yeah, it's having less of an impact now, but it does affect the whole family.
I'm sorry to hear that. I really am. But great to hear that you're managing it and you're doing it really well.
Yeah, I think you have to find your own way. It's just trial and error. And like I said, you can still get it wrong. Even after 9 years, I can overdo it. I think it's that excitement. Oh, I'm having a good day. And you give yourself loads and loads of chores and, make the most of it. And then it's easy to go over the top. But yeah, I'm better than I was, that's for sure.
Good.
I mean, having all of those, children at such short age gaps as well, at that age, mine aren't too far off, 8, 4 and 2. And, it's all that energy and they constantly want your attention and so demanding. I mean, that zaps your energy at best. And then obviously having lupus. I mean, how did you cope, Wendy, during those times?
I don't know. I kind of look back and think, how did I do it? I guess they did swimming lessons, they did curbs, they did lots of things. If people offered lifts, I accepted help with that kind of thing. And just somehow you get through it. And I just slept whenever I could, really. I ended up working part-time, although I finished that in 2016. It was just trying to sleep when the children weren't around. I think one of the hardest times for people with lupus, believe it or not, is cooking that evening meal. I've had a discussion with some of my members recently because you're absolutely exhausted and the children are exhausted by that point in the day as well, aren't they? And there's that feeling of dread that you've got to, cook something wonderful up in the kitchen every night for them. And sometimes I would have a nap just so that I'd have the energy to cook an evening meal. And I'm still like that if I get a flare now. That seems to be the worst point of the day when you literally could go to bed and stay there, but you've got to, okay, not every night. My husband's great. And, the odd takeaway has come into the house. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the hardest bits.
It seems like sort of planning, and really putting a lot of thought into what you're doing, where you're going, who you're going to be around is vital, and some probably very strong advice with people that have lupus.
Yeah, I think so. Fatigue is completely overwhelming when it hits you. There's nothing you can do to stop it. And it does take a lot of time to sort of adjust your life to that because, at 39, I wasn't old. And I'd been quite active before. I'd done half marathons and things like that. We built our own house. I would always had a busy, active life. So I think a lot of people say, and I think I can relate to this, is you kind of grieve the old you, because you know that life is never quite going to be the same again. Even with the good spells, you don't know how long they're going to last. They might be a couple of days, they might be longer if you're lucky, but you've really got to come to terms with mentally the fact that you won't be living life as a normal person. Yeah.
I mean, a great question you've got here, Hayley, as well, because I mean that is the big sort of question we ask these days, isn't it? Is there a cure? What can you do to treat it?
Yeah, there isn't a cure. It's chronic. It's lifelong. I mean, going back to sort of 1950s, 1960s, lupus was a terminal illness. It's not anymore, thank goodness. So there are medications out there, but we are behind with research with things like this, with like rheumatoid arthritis and psoriatic arthritis and other autoimmune conditions. There seem to be a lot more drugs available to try. So we need to catch up with the lupus medication, but ultimately it is trial and error. There are disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs that are available, and there are some biologics, hydroxychloroquine, methotrexate, mycophenolate mofetil. They're just some of the names of the drugs that we try. And because every lupus person has a different combination of symptoms, inevitably we all end up with different sort of combination of drugs as well. So at the moment I take 12 tablets a day, and then on a Monday I take methotrexate as well, so that's an extra 8 tablets, so it's 20 tablets on a Monday. It sounds quite a lot when you say it out loud, but it enables me to have a relatively normal life. So yeah, medication is a difficult one, because you can take something and then actually end up feeling worse, or it might benefit you, but it's just that constantly trying a new combination.
Well, that's incredible. That's a huge amount of medication to take. What's your take on that, Hayley?
I've been reading a little bit about it today. I think it's got to be quite debilitating when the flare up, as you said, but you see, while you're seeing the external symptoms in terms of fatigue and things like that, do they test and keep on top of what's going on underneath, inside the body as well?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I would say that unfortunately care in our area isn't the best for lupus patients. I actually travel to London and see an expert there. So I'm very lucky that between the expert in London and my GP, I do get most of the tests that I need. But there are quite a lot of monitoring things that should be done that don't get done. I mean, the NHS is really struggling at the moment, isn't it, coming out of COVID and long waiting lists. And unfortunately, that's just the position that we're in, that things that should be done don't always get done. I know that I'm lucky to see the lupus expert, and that's enabled me to get this drug combination and live as I am. But not everyone is that fortunate.
I've got so many questions. Can I go again?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the when we did. I did ask you off air. It states there's no known initial trigger, but you said, looking back with hindsight, it comes from the pregnancy, or your last pregnancy.
Yeah, I had my third child in January 2008, and with hindsight, I can kind of see then that I had symptoms that I think I'd always had eczema and various things as a child, and hay fever and allergies and things. And I'd always been, my nickname used to be Bendy Wendy. I've always been able to put my hands flat on the floor with my legs straight, and just silly little things like that. But also teenage migraine, growing pains. I now know that those kind of things are quite, connect them all together. And the picture was there really from being a young girl. But yeah, I think it's a tricky one. Lupus is possibly caused by not just one sort of DNA genetics. It's a combination. 9 out of 10 lupus patients are women. There's a very close link to hormones. So teenage girls, unfortunately, that's a common time for girls to be diagnosed with it. And then after childbirth or during the menopause. And also having sort of a virus can be a trigger. Epstein-Barr and various other things are known triggers for lupus.
Okay. Did you have an easy time at diagnosis?
Yes and no. When I went to the GP, I was really lucky. For starters, she didn't tell me off for Googling and coming to the doctor's surgery with an idea of what I had, because I know some doctors don't like that. So I had to sit there and very carefully sort of say, my husband watched a television program and then I've Googled and we think I've got lupus. And luckily she didn't sort of get upset with me or tell me not to be so silly. I went through everything with her and she agreed. And she ordered some blood tests, and I had 2 positive blood tests that were quite good markers at that point. But unfortunately, it kind of went wrong at that stage. I went to see a rheumatologist privately because I was really struggling to cope with life, and they told me there was a 4-month waiting list to see the NHS specialist, and I thought, I don't know if I can carry on for 4 months this bad. So I went to see a specialist, and he diagnosed me with a form of lupus called SCLE, or subacute cutaneous lupus erythematosus, and sent me off with a prescription for hydroxychloroquine, and told me that my lupus would only be active in the summer, and I probably would only need to take that medication during the summer months, and the rest of the year I'd be fine, and I didn't have any systemic involvement whatsoever. So initially I came away from that appointment thinking, I've got off really lightly here. I'm one of the lucky ones. But then as time went on, I kind of realized, actually, no, I wasn't just getting symptoms in the summer. I was getting symptoms all year round, and the hydroxychloroquine wasn't doing enough for me. So I ended up having to look for a second opinion, and that was really, really challenging. I couldn't get an expert opinion on the NHS in Wales. So that was when I initially went to London, and I paid to have a second opinion in London, and I got told straight away at that appointment that I'd had systemic lupus all along.
Wow. So you kind of had it easy to begin with, and then needed to sort of confirm that was the case.
Yeah.
I've got another 3 questions, but I'm going to ask this one. Are there many people who use sort of natural things as well, naturopaths or homeopathy or things like that to support their health as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the main thing there is complementary medicine. It's not going to control your lupus on your own, and you need to speak to your doctor about that kind of thing, because you really can't just drop your lupus medication and go that way without advice, really. And that would be my main point there. But yeah, I mean, there are various things that people try. We are really prone to cardiovascular disease as well. It's one of the biggest killers for lupus patients. So I know a lot of people try vegetarian or vegan diets, also things like turmeric or ginger. There's various things that people will try. I think cod liver oil, I think, has got some anti-inflammatory properties. There's various things out there that you can try, and why not? But also relaxation therapies are good as well, because stress isn't good for lupus patients. So if you like reflexology or a massage or some sort of treat, that's really, really good as well.
I'll pass it on to you now, Tammy, because I could go all night. Every time I got another question, so I'll pass it on to Tammy now.
All right, just in that you can ask away afterwards, Hayley. Honestly, it's fine. I just wanted to, I've done my bit of reading as well, and I can see that over 3,000 people in Wales have lupus.
Yes.
But I'm also guessing compared to England, it's also that postcode lottery that you touched on about treatment, etc. So from where you were back, 9 years ago when you were officially diagnosed, what does the future look like now for lupus patients?
That's a difficult one, because I mean, obviously you've realised that I've done a little bit of campaigning about lupus care in Wales. It's not great, unfortunately. I found out quite early on that the centres of excellence that are established by Lupus UK, the charity, are all in England. And they've increased even recent years with COVID and austerity. Those have increased in number, and we've got more applications in the pipeline, which is great. And the way it works in England is, if you want a second opinion, you can ask to be referred to a centre of excellence. You can see a lupus expert. That expert will then work with your local rheumatologist, and they'll implement their treatment plan and help with monitoring, etc. So you've got the best of both worlds, really. You might only need to see the lupus expert once a year or once every 2 years, depending on how your disease goes, but it works really, really well there. And I realised that we didn't have centres of excellence in England, so I started questioning why we didn't have them. But I also wanted to know if I could access them, and I got told categorically that I wasn't allowed to be referred out of Wales. So I questioned that, and I started corresponding with my MP and various things, and kind of realised that actually there's this policy that says lupus in Wales, lupus patients don't need expert lupus care. They can be looked after by their general rheumatologist, and there's no reason for them to access expert care unless they're seriously ill. Unfortunately, that's quite an outdated view, really, because not only in England, but in a lot of European countries now, and in America, it is seen that it needs expert care because it's so serious. So we've got a bit of catching up to do with that, and sort of trying to change opinion in Wales and make people realise that this is this has a severe impact on your life, and it also can affect your life expectancy if you don't get the medication right.
I'm really hoping that after people listen today, because you're such a fantastic advocate, it might make people just stop and think about a loved one or a friend that maybe has similar symptoms to you.
Yeah, it's not just lupus. There are other diseases in Wales that have the same barriers, unfortunately. And Wales is a little country. We have like 3.1 million population. So you can't expect Welsh NHS to cover every single specialism out there for every illness. It's just not possible. But if that is the case, I think just to have a fair system, we should be able to access that expertise in England.
I know it's quite startling, when the sad fact is, Wendy, we come across this quite often when there is a sort of specialist area that the NHS can't deal with, and unfortunately there just seems to be roadblock after roadblock. And as Tammy rightfully says, you're a great advocate and rightly so campaigning, and we wish you the best of luck. And if there's anything we can do here at Pure West Radio to spread the word. Of course we will. Hayley, I know you had quite a few questions for Wendy, but is there a final word you'd like to have?
I'm going to go with is when it's progressing, does it progress? Do you have moments where you sort of are feeling all the symptoms, or is it progressive and you just, as the next flare up, there's something else added to it?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. It's not, strictly speaking, I don't think it is defined as a progressive illness, but I would say that most lupus patients probably feel that it is. It's not going to get easier with age, unfortunately. And also you tend to get overlapping conditions. So I have Sjogren's and Raynaud's as well. And you tend to collect them, unfortunately, once you've got one. You know, as life goes on, lots of people have thyroid issues and all sorts of other problems. And you can also have rheumatoid arthritis with it. So I think although my lupus is under control, and I generally, I'm on a lot of medication, I'm still having flares. I had a big flare in January this year. I'm waiting to see a cardiologist for a second opinion on something that was picked up in my echocardiogram in January. So I think you kind of deal with some symptoms and then the next flare will be slightly different. My mobility has been quite badly affected in the last year. I have a lot of problems with my legs. So yeah, it can feel that it's, you know, it's not getting better.
Okay.
Great question there, Hayley. Final word from you, Tammy?
I just have to go back to just it's a minefield, and where you've come from, you know, to where you are now is a massive journey. But again, you're a brilliant advocate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me on today.
No, absolute pleasure, Wendy. Thank you for sharing your experiences, some of them very personal, and keep up the wonderful work campaigning for lupus, as it was World Lupus Day yesterday. I mean, to have that significant day in itself shows you that there is, you know, a need to express more information, to communicate with one another, and you know, let's hope that our MP and like-minded people hopefully can get around a table and allow access to people like yourself and other people with lupus, the access that they should be granted over the border. I mean, it's just ludicrous. You can't get that. It really is. But that's the bonkers world we live in 2023, unfortunately. We're supposed to be United Kingdom, but hey, that's a conversation for another day. Wendy, anyway, thank you ever so much for joining us here on Healthy Minds, Better Lives, and taking some time out of your evening. I'm sure now you're probably absolutely shattered and it's well past your bedtime. So we really do appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. And thank you with our sincerity for joining us here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Our absolute pleasure. Healthy Minds, Better Lives. And we're covering quite a few topics here this evening. If you've been affected by anything or you'd like to put a question forward, please make sure you do so. It's 01437 764455 on the WhatsApp. You can also call that number as well. 01437 764455. It's Healthy Minds, Better Lives. You're locked into POS Radio. This is